Yo, what's up guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops, and today we're hopping right back into my top 50 list in NBA history. Now for today's video, we got Oscar Robertson. Now where do I got the Big O on my all-time list? I got him ranked at number 9. Now before we hop into Big O, gonna need you guys to drop a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and also feel free to comment down below what are your thoughts on Oscar Robertson, maybe if I go too high or too low on him or something like that. Without further ado, let's get into Oscar Robertson. So he was a 12-time NBA All-Star from 1961 until 1972, a 9-time All-NBA First Team member from 1961 to 1969, and also made All-NBA Second Team twice in 1970 and 1971. In fact, he was the NBA's most valuable player in 1964, a scoring champion in 1968, and a 6-time assist leader in 1961, 1962, 1964, all the way till 1966, and then also 1969, and then of course a one-time NBA champion in 1971 with the Bucks. For MVP shares, 11 times he received votes, 9 of which he was a top 5 finisher, once was a runner-up in 1965, and a one-time winner in 1964. Now the top 2 finishes don't include his 1961-1962 season, where he averaged a 30-point per game triple-double and was the first player to ever do so in NBA history, because he finished 3rd in MVP. I still believe he should have been at least top 2, as Wilt was putting up a monster 50 points per game, 25 rebounds per game, and both should have finished above Bill Russell. But speaking of Russell, I believe he low-key robbed Oscar in 1965 for MVP. Oscar was a better scorer, more efficient, led the league in assists per game and win shares, a higher PER than Bill, and he was still a top 3 record and top 2 seed as well as the best offensive team in the league, a feat that Oscar led the Royals to accomplishing for 6 consecutive years. While most were without another top 100 player of all time, meanwhile teams like Boston, the Lakers, the Warriors all had several. As for some all-time stats, 25.7 points per game is 10th all-time, 9.5 assists per game is 3rd all-time, and he's actually the only player in NBA history to be top 10 all-time in both those categories. 26,710 points is 13th all-time, 9,887 assists is 7th all-time, 7,804 rebounds is 75th, which is pretty impressive as a point guard in a league where big men played more consistently around the basket. A 23.2 PER is 24th all-time, 189.2 win shares is 11th all-time, 152 offensive win shares is 4th all-time, a .207 win share per 48 rating is 20th all-time, and 181 triple-doubles is 2nd in NBA history. And I didn't mention true shooting, but Oscar was also one of the most efficient players in that category as well. In fact, he still is the only player in NBA history to finish top 3 in true shooting percentage for 10 consecutive NBA seasons, and the only rookie to ever lead the league in true shooting percentage as well. I used a benchmark player in translating Jerry West's efficiency to today's game, the average 3-point shooter for point guards last season, which was Kobe White. And if we were to use that for Oscar, his efficiency would jump from 56.4% true shooting to 61.7% true shooting, which would place him 8th on the all-time list. And if we did the change with increasing his efficiency inside the 3-point extended region, as we did for West, because of the fact that with a heavy floor spacing league and the addition of a defensive 3-second violation to prevent big men from camping in the paint like in Oscar's era, then he would be sitting at 63% true shooting, 3rd all-time, only behind Artis Gilmore and DeAndre Jordan, primarily 0 to 3 feet finishers. That's above Harden, above Reggie Miller, and ironically above the guy that most people say is the most efficient player ever, and that's Steph Curry. But I even did the transition for Steph to see how his efficiency would fare back then. If you simply make all his 3-point shots worth 2s, that puts his efficiency in the 1960s era as 53.25% true shooting, whereas Oscar's, remember, was over 56%. But of course he wouldn't be shooting as many deep shots because of a coach in the 60s would constantly pull him for doing so. But 2 things. If we adjusted the opposite side of the percentage boost for attacking the basket in an era where big men camped in the paint, his true shooting percentage jumps down to 51.31%. And 2, that isn't Steph Curry's game. He would be a totally different player. Without his best resource, there's greater skepticism to his effectiveness compared to Oscar Robertson. This is why when I see his fan base use words like portability in different eras, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, if Oscar played today, we know he'd be a great passer, a great leader, great scorer, efficient from everywhere on the court. He was also a better defender than Steph, and his efficiency would even be a boost with the 3-point shot. And again, this is just with a slightly below average 3-point shooter in Kobe White's efficiency and volume, because quite frankly, Oscar would get more opportunity than him in today's league to shoot a higher volume, and if he played in this era, most likely would shoot better too. He was a top 3 shooter for his own time, and arguably the GOAT mid-range shooter. I compare him to the point guard version of Tim Duncan Duncan because he was strictly business and fundamentals. And he even had that killer mentality like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant before those guys did. I mean, guys like Kareem and John Havlicek, who hold high value on my own top 50 list, have both said they believe he's the greatest player of all time. Jerry West said he's the greatest player he's ever played against, over Wilt, over Bill Russell, and even Bill's coach Red Auerbach said that Oscar was so great that he scared him. Rick Barry called him the greatest athlete in the history of sports. John Wooden believed Oscar Robertson was the greatest player to play the game of basketball before Larry Bird came along. And even last year, John Sally said in an interview that Michael Jordan told him that even though he doesn't really categorize a single greatest player, if he had to pick one, it would be Oscar Robertson. Those are all literally Hall of Famers saying right there that Oscar was either the greatest player ever or of his time, at the very least. And in that case, it cannot be some old head logic because, well, it's compared with players of his own time. And yeah, I didn't put him as the GOAT because I really don't think that he is the GOAT, but I do believe he's the second best player from his era behind only Wilt Chamberlain, which to an extent is kind of overblown in favor of Wilt. I mean, believe it or not, in the first 5 seasons of Oscar's career with the Royals, he received more first place MVP votes than Wilt Chamberlain every year from 1960 to 1965, including winning an MVP in that time while Wilt didn't, and including more first place votes in the year that Oscar averaged the 30-point triple-double than Wilt did with his 50 and 25. But anyways, just needed to inform you guys a little lack of context about people that think he was just a triple-double guy. But let's move on to the playoffs. Now, Oscar's all-time playoff stats are negatively affected, mainly because of his last season with the lingering issues and how they made the finals and it was a long playoff run that he suffered ever since 1972, to be honest. But over his Royals career, he averaged 25 points per game in all 8 playoff series, 3 30-point per game series, 10 assists per game in 4 of 8 playoff series, and 10 rebounds per game in 3 of 8 playoff series. He shot over 50% from the field in 3 series and 85% from the free throw line in 6 series as well, which is very impressive for this time, let alone a point guard. And he even averaged a triple-double in his first playoff run in 1962, making him the first and only player as of today to ever do this. But he couldn't get over the hump because of just better teams. I mean, he never had a statistically bad series with the Royals for one. In 1963, he single-handedly willed his team to a Game 7 against the 8 Hall of Famer Boston Celtics, even dropping 43, 6, and 6 on 46% from the field and 96% from the free throw line in the Game 7. 1964 was a lot of the same story, except Boston beat him in 5. But even though Oscar was about 40% from the field, which was his worst for any Royals series for him, he still averaged about 28, 10, and 6 this series, and this is a playoff run where he led the entire league for true shooting percentage. I mean, the round prior against Philadelphia, he put up 30 points per game, 11 assists per game, 8 rebounds per game on about 54% from the field and 86% from the free throw line, good for about 66% true shooting. And in the deciding Game 5 in the best of 5 series, he dropped 32 points, 18 assists, 10 rebounds, 67% from the field and 100% from the free throw line in 12 attempts, good for 79% true shooting. In 1965, they lost to Wilt Sixers. Oscar was great once again, and at least Jerry Lucas started to come into his own to make Oscar's life offensively a little easier, but it still wasn't quite enough, nor was it really what they needed. They lacked an interior presence as Wayne Embry was kind of getting old, and this would kind of be a problem in Oscar's second half of his stint with the Royals. Their defense was just bad inside, so much so that after Embry and Jack Twyman left, the Royals wanted to rebuild, as stupid as that sounds. The next year though, Oscar took the Celtics to the final game of a best of 5 again, averaging about 32, 7.5, and 8 a game on 41% from the field and 90% from the free throw line, and he didn't get really any support from Jerry Lucas in the closeout, or really anybody for that matter. In 1967, he was great once again. He did get outplayed by Wilt Chamberlain, which is probably the first time you could say that in his career in a playoff series, but again, Wilt was kind of insane. After this, the Royals hired Joe Axelson for management, a guy with zero basketball background and several coaches, none of which even compared to the mediocre Jack McMahon. And in 1970, after hiring a jealous Bob Cousy, it was kind of the end of Oscar in Cincinnati. Cousy was reportedly jealous of Oscar and even inserted himself to play as a player coach and even start over Oscar. Before Oscar and Cousy both agreed it would be best for him to leave. And when he went to Milwaukee, he thrived. I mean, top 5 in MVP his first year there, 67 and 15, and he finally played with a superstar for the first time ever, Lou Alcindor. And in his first NBA Finals, Oscar was amazing. He wasn't the Finals MVP, but he had 4 of his 5 best playoff games in this playoff run in the NBA Finals. Scoring over 20 points and over 7 assists in every single game in this Finals, he averaged 23.5 points per game, 9.5 assists, assists, 5 rebounds on 52% from the field and 81% from the free throw line, and swept the Bullets in the first year after Bob Cousy embarrassed himself by trying to get rid of Oscar. The rest of the Bucks' career kind of has some what ifs. I mean, Oscar had some injuries. Lucius Allen was injured in 1974. Oscar was really good in 1973, however, but actually Kareem choked in this series against the Warriors. I mean, Nate Thurman kind of had him in jail. But when it comes to the Big O, he's underrated. I mean, he has the highest peak win shares of a point guard ever, and the second highest by a guard ever behind only Michael Jordan. He's a top 5 facilitator, top 10 playmaker, top 10 scorer, and was a really good defender too. I mean, yeah, his Royals team sucked defensively, but no defense at that time without a 3-point line was going to win if he didn't have a big man inside with an interior presence. He was aggressive, but rarely ever over-gambled. Sure, he wasn't the defender that Jerry West was, but if all defensive teams existed in his prime in the mid-1960s, he would have made at least a couple all-defensive teams. He's arguably the GOAT mid-range shooter, a 5-star athlete with great quickness too, and I don't think people realize he was an insane track star in high school across the nation. He's one of the smartest and highest IQ players the NBA has ever seen, both on and off the court. I believe he's the most skilled point guard ever, and many have labeled him the best all-around player ever. He's versatile and even changed the game with promoting positionless basketball instead of being assigned by size. Guys like Cade Cunningham and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the NBA right now, for example. I mean, his peers respect him, and you can't really say that's old head bias because they were comparing him to players of his own time. Guys like Wilt or Bill Russell. And people only give those two praise for being an African American playing in an enduring time when racism was prominent. But don't ever give Oscar his flowers for that. I mean, he was the president of the NBA's Player Association for 9 years, which is the longest tenured president in NBPA history. And he was the lead man on one of the biggest lawsuits in NBA history, which resulted in us getting free agency to see stuff like Shaq to the Lakers or LeBron's decision. Without Oscar, the NBA is in a much worse place. Don't be fooled because of little kids that think he's the same player as Russell Westbrook because of triple doubles, or the people that don't realize the adversity he overcame in the real world off the court and the terrible management in Cincinnati that affected him on it, until he showed them up in Milwaukee. I mean, Oscar Robertson is a top 10 player of all time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I think when it comes to Oscar, this is probably the video I was looking forward to the most on the top 50 because he needs the most context for his career, and he's probably one of the most misinformed players in NBA history. That's why this is going to be the longest video probably of this whole top 50 list. I'm going to keep it real. And if it's not, then it's just because I did a lot of editing so that it wouldn't run over too much. I mean, this one definitely has probably the most information. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching, and I'm gonna leave it at that. So yeah, I'm out. Peace.